All right, well, we're ready. Are you counting us down or are we on? We're talking today with Josh Karr of Wyoming, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Karr, can you start by giving us a little bit of background on yourself? To begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in 1979 in Grand Rapids.
Okay. And did your family live in Grand Rapids or Wyoming? Or?
My family grew up in Wyoming, and by the time I was born, they all lived in Marne.
Mm-hmm. And then is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up out in Marne.
Okay. And what did your family do for a living?
Well, my dad is a master electrician, so he usually does electrical stuff. And my mom, a lot of the time, worked at the post office.
Okay. And then, let's see, did you go to high school in Marne or Coopersville or?
I started high school at Kennewa, but my parents decided to go with homeschool instead.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my last 3 years of school, I was homeschooled.
Okay. And then when did you finish school?
In 1998.
Okay. And then what did you do after you were done?
I mostly just got Joe jobs. I was a cook and 2 or 3 different restaurants over the next probably 4 years. And yeah, just cook.
All right. And do you remember how you heard about 9/11?
Yeah, actually I was sleeping. I had an apartment with my brother, and I was sleeping, and he yelled to me to wake up and come look at the TV, and I looked, and one of the World Trade Centers was on fire, and I thought, you know, that's pretty interesting. I don't know why I got out of bed for a plane hitting a building. And then another plane hit the other building. I thought it was a replay. You know, I said, hey, look, they're showing it again. And then I noticed the other tower was still on fire, and I said, well, that's not good. And then they said somebody hit the Pentagon, and I knew it was war. That's how I heard about 9/11.
All right. Now, how long after that was it when you enlisted?
I talked to my recruiter 2 months later, and then 2 months after that, I was in boot camp.
Okay. Now, had you been thinking about going into the service before that?
I'd considered it. The recruiter actually was able to call me because I checked in with one when I was 18 and decided it wasn't for me at the time.
Okay. And which branch of the service had you contacted at that time?
I checked with the Navy.
Okay. And why were you interested in the Navy?
Because of a junk mail I got from them when I was younger that said my test scores qualified me for the nuclear program.
All right. So you sort of had some inkling. All right. And then was it sort of the aftermath of 9/11 that kind of made you think, okay, it's time to step up and do something? Or what was it that motivated you then to actually go in and sign up?
Yeah, it was basically it was my turn to go to war. I mean, every generation gets one, I figure, and it was just my turn.
Had your father or any relatives been in the service?
My father was the only man from his immediate family that didn't go. He was gonna, and my mom told him, no, you have kids. You stay here until they call you. And so he didn't have to go. But I had 2 of his brothers were Navy. One of them was a lifer, mm-hmm. and he had another brother who was a Marine.
All right. Now, once you enlist, sort of kind of take me through the process, physicals, training, what happens once you're in?
Well, there's a pre-screening at the recruiter where they make sure you just fit the height and weight requirements and check your criminal history and what have you. And then in boot camp, there's a further, criminal screening and ongoing physical tests.
Okay. And where did you go for boot camp?
Great Lakes.
Okay.
Actually, when I got there, it was the only Navy basic training facility left. They wanted to centralize because they felt too spread out with having recruits in 3 different locations.
And about how many recruits do you think were there at the time, or how large was the group that you were training with?
A lot. It was an 8 or 10 week program, and there were 10 groups of about 80 men each graduating every Friday.
All right. Now, the men in your particular group, what kind of profile did they have? Where were they from? How old were they?
Well, they were from all over the country and a couple from different parts of the world. And they were mostly under 20, between 18 and 20. We had one guy who was 17 and a half because his parents signed a release to get him in early. And I don't think there was anyone in my division who was older than I was.
All right. And did you feel any different from the rest of them or feel like you were older than they were, or were you close enough it didn't matter so much?
We were close enough, and just the basic training program didn't allow anyone really to feel differently from anyone else.
Okay. How did the basic training program actually work? What did they have you do and what were they trying to accomplish?
There was a little bit of like classroom education, and that was kind of cool. It was hard to stay awake through that because there was also a sleep deprivation ongoing program where I don't think anyone slept more than 3 hours on a good night all through basic training. Then there was a lot of physical training, and we marched in ranks. We weren't supposed to run. I guess in the summer the whole division runs from like from the barracks to the chow hall, but it was winter time, so we didn't run. But everyone who was short, everyone who was below average in height had to run anyway, because we had road guards. We had to block the road to keep cars from running over the recruits. You got to run ahead of the division and post up in the road and then run to catch up when they finally tell you to come back. So I still ran every day in boot camp.
Okay. How much emphasis was there on discipline and following orders?
That was the main emphasis. They wanted us to learn the nautical terms and, learn how to wear uniforms. But the main thing was just shut up and follow orders.
Okay. Now, how hard was it for the men in your particular group to adjust to that?
Well, it was pretty varied. I mean, there were guys who didn't ever figure it out, which there's a reverse training transfer. They can actually keep you in boot camp indefinitely. There's a guy who he petitioned the base to give him his first promotion because he'd been there 9 months, and you're supposed to get E2 after 9 months. But for the most part, people learn it. Some guys live for it, so they were even easier to.
Mhm. And how did the drill instructors treat you?
Well, that was fun. We had one who was just scary because he kept his mouth shut until it was time to discipline someone, and then we had one who kept throwing tantrums all the time, kicking stuff around. He was more just lively than frightening. And then there was one who was just like one of the guys.
Did you have a sense that was by design or just kind of how it worked out?
Yeah, I think that's how it worked out. I suppose in retrospect, they probably try to keep it varied for that too.
All right. Now, this is about an 8 to 10 week process. Once you complete that, what do you do next?
Well, some guys went straight to their primary duty station. I went to my rate training. I went to machinist mate A school.
And where was that?
That was also in Great Lakes.
Okay.
We had to wait 3 days for the bus to take us basically across the street.
All right. Describe that training process, or what were you learning, and how did that work?
That one was more academic. It was a classroom setting, about probably 15 or 20 guys to a class, and that was it was the basics of mechanical work. I mean, everything from like the names of different pipe elbows to the names of different wrenches to screwdrivers, all the way up through main space mechanical operation.
Okay. And were you getting electrical or just plumbing, or what were you studying?
There was a little bit of everything. There was engineering common core, which was it covered everything from different wires you see. Generally, this color is for this, and what have you. But then there was mechanical core, which talked more about wrenches and bolts and nuts and fittings, and then machinist mate A school was how to operate machinery.
All right. Now, did you have military instructors or civilians?
They were all military. They were all machinist mates, except the one from my mechanical corps, for some reason, was gas turbine engineer.
Okay. And were these all sort of NCOs, or did,
Yeah, they were all NCOs. They were mostly E6s. One or two of them were E5s.
all right. Now, during this phase of the training, do you get to go off base, and do you get time off, or?
Sometimes there were different phases of liberty, and the one I was in was I had to actually be in a uniform coming and going from the base, but that I otherwise had free roam until lights out.
And was there much to do around there?
There was not much to do. There was a canteen on the base, but mostly just a couple of friends and I would take the train up and down the Lake Michigan coast there and hit different cities, see what was in them.
I mean, exciting places like Racine and Kenosha, or to go down to Chicago, or?
Yeah, I think Kenosha was the one we spent the most time. There was a bar there with big meaty chicken wings, the biggest, meatiest wings with the hottest sauce that we could find, and that became our regular bar for the next couple of weeks.
All right. Now, once you complete this phase of training, do you now go to a duty station, or what happens next?
The next deal was 2 months at home leave, or 2 weeks, 2 weeks at home leave before ship out, and then you go to your primary duty station.
Okay. So where do they send you?
I went to San Diego, where I served on board the USS Constellation for about a year.
Okay. Describe the Constellation for us. What kind of ship was it?
The Connie was a humongous aircraft carrier. It was huge. I think it was 3 football fields long on top, and it was tall. It went down to the 7th deck, and then below that were tanks and voids, so about 8 decks, and then the water line was usually about the 3rd or 4th deck, and then above that you get to the 1st deck, and then it goes up to the 04 level is the flight deck, and then the island, the superstructure, is like 05 through 011.
About how many men were on it?
It took 3,000 guys to run the boat, and another 2,000 or 3,000 for the airplanes and what have you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an awful lot of people. I mean, where did they put you? How do they arrange things like living quarters and meals and the rest of that?
Well, the enlisted men slept in berthings, which were basically rooms probably like 100 feet by 50 feet and probably 8 feet high, however tall the deck was. And we slept in racks, 3 high, and I measured mine once. It was 1.5 feet by 2 feet by 6 feet long, which was 18 cubic feet, and that was pretty standard. Everyone had 18 cubic feet.
Were there height limits to being in the Navy? I mean, what if you're 6'4" or something like that?
Well, I'm not sure there was a top limit, but if you're too tall, then your feet get crunched up. You don't really sleep as well as the smaller guys.
All right. And then how do they handle things like the food?
The food was, we had 2 main mess decks, and you just stand in line until you get to food. Standing in line was pretty much the most important part of our training, I think.
Okay. Had you spent much time in boats or on the water before you joined the Navy?
No, I had never actually seen the ocean before I joined the Navy.
All right. So what was it like to actually head out to sea for the first time?
It was interesting. I thought there would be some sort of seasickness, but the aircraft carrier is far too big to be unstable. I mean, I could feel we were underway, but there was no rocking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a more civilized way to go than some of the old tubs they sailed in back in World War II, I guess, because that was kind of a standard feature of a lot of the earlier rounds of shipping out. Now, what were your specific duties on the Constellation when you first got there?
I was in the main space. I was on the fire room side of the main space, which meant I was basically a boiler operator. But since I was brand new, I was a messenger. My job was just to wander around. Well, not wander. I had regular rounds, but I had to go around and take readings off all the equipment and report them to the guy whose job was actually to take the readings so that he could sign the log. And then I'd, run from the space up to whatever other shop I need to visit, because that's what messengers do.
Hmm. Okay. And how long did you do that?
Well, that was pretty much the underway period. So about 7 months.
Okay. Uh, did that get kind of boring after a while, or a routine, or was there always something different happening?
Well, there was always something different happening. I mean, we were always pushed to qualify for the next watch station. And after we got qualified, they tried to get us on a better watch schedule, because if we didn't have enough guys, then we were 6 and 6, which is 6 hours of work or watch and 6 hours of downtime, which you're going to spend sleeping when it's that hot. So we got down to 4 and 8, and I managed to qualify for upper level man, which is a little cooler. It's a little more interesting job, because you actually get to control the valves that allow the boiler feed water, and the combustion air is a little more responsibility.
And what kind of power plant did the carrier have?
It was a 1200 psi boiler. Ours were Foster Wheeler, and we
Did it burn oil or?
yeah, diesel fuel marine. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Do you have a sense about how old the carrier was?
The keel was laid in 1968, I believe.
Okay. And were the boilers and so forth pretty much original issue?
Yeah, the boilers were original equipment. It took a lot of maintenance, actually. Every time we shut them down, we had to go inside and fix something, or reline the firebox with the fiber fracks.
Had they incorporated much technology in terms of just maintaining it better or monitoring things better, or were you still pretty much working with the same kind of systems they would have had back in the 70s?
The control systems, it was pretty cool. We had control air, which was low pressure air to operate most of the smaller valves. It was pretty cool. And that was actually a later addition. They said the original watch team would have been like 50 guys per space, and we were down to about like 12, I think.
So having 5,000 men on the carrier is actually more efficient than it used to be.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they could fit more airplanes, I think.
Okay. Now, when you were based in San Diego, did you actually stay in port for any amount of time, or were you out to sea pretty quickly after you got there?
We were never in port when I was there for more than a couple of weeks. And a lot of it was because we were preparing to deploy. So there were a lot of at-sea trial periods, a lot of testing of equipment and what have you, and then visits. We went to San Diego, or we were in San Diego. We went to Seattle for some reason. And just before I got there, they had gone to Mexico for, I don't know, visits. I don't know what the purpose is of going all these different bases.
All right. And so how much time did you spend kind of just going in and out of San Diego before you went anywhere else?
I don't know. There's a whole schedule to the workups and the shakedowns and what have you. Most of those little trial at sea periods last from like a week to 3 weeks, but some of them go longer.
Okay. Now, did you eventually actually go and cross the Pacific and go somewhere else, or while you were on the Constellation, did you just stay based in San Diego?
Yeah, at some point we went out. We actually did circles around Hawaii, just because it was there. We could do circles around it, and then we went through the China Sea, which was really hot. And we stopped at Hong Kong and Singapore on our way into the Gulf. And then we went into the Persian Gulf, and I had to fly home. So they flew me, well, they dropped me at the base and flew me to back to Grand Rapids. So I actually ended up going around the world from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to go back, and I flew back. And then the war started. They finally declared war, like just after I got back on board.
All right. Yeah. So you're there. You're on the ship. You're training. You're doing the exercises, and eventually you're shipping out. That's the period between 9/11 and the beginning of the Iraq War in '03. Were you paying much attention to kind of political developments and what might happen? Was there an anticipation that you were going to go ahead into a war in Iraq, or were you not really focusing on things that far in front of you?
Well, we all really knew it was time for a war. Nobody really had any question about it. And the only reason to watch the news was to find out if they'd declare war yet.
Hmm.
Find out, whether we were doing our job or we were just gonna keep doing circles.
All right. And then what was the sort of the mood or the morale like on the ship as you're heading across the Pacific and going into the Gulf?
Well, it was just work and sleep. So I mean, nobody really had much of anything to say. I mean, there were a lot of jokes.
Hmm.
Try to keep, the spirits light, but mostly it was just work and sleep and shut up and work some more. And
Okay. Now, when they're flying you in and out, were they using military aircraft or commercial flights or?
I used military flight to get from the boat to Bahrain, and then I think I flew from a military air base. No, I was in a civilian airstrip. I remember there was some lady with a couple little kids running around, and there was a flight going to Casablanca. I remember there's some Arab guy standing in the airport smoking a cigarette, and he just threw a cigarette on the marble floor and walked away. He didn't even snub it out. I thought that was odd.
Mm.
Usually people step on him when they throw him on the ground.
Okay. Now, were you traveling in uniform?
I was not in uniform. We were too close to war.
Hmm.
They didn't want anyone just wandering around, especially through Arab countries,
Hmm.
in uniform.
All right. So you go home, you come back, the war starts. What happens on the ship at that point?
Everybody got happy because we were finally doing our job. I mean, we were working hard keeping the boat going, but it was really pointless just driving in circles in the water. And then finally we were at war.
Hmm. And then when that began, or were you now following, the news and that kind of thing and paying attention to the progress of it, or were you just mostly having to do the job?
Yeah, it was still just a job. I mean, there was really no time for the news. And watching the news never really helped anyway, because they didn't know what we were doing. And things they said had nothing to do with what I saw.
Right. What kinds of things were you seeing?
And one time I saw a goat floating in the water, all dead and bloated. I don't know. Mostly I just saw valves and gauges.
Sure.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Now, but you're actually cruising in the Gulf at this point. So you're there rather than out in the Arabian Sea or farther out. Did you have other ships with you, or were you pretty much by yourself? Or?
Yeah, there were ships from all over. We saw some Canadian ships and some Australian aircraft carriers, and I think some British boats. Everybody was there.
Hmm. Okay. And then did you go in and out of port or just stay out at sea?
We did manage to get into port a few times at Bahrain. And it's funny, they say there's a curse in Bahrain that if you don't go see the tree of life, which is just some mysterious tree growing in the desert, then you're doomed to go back 7 times. And I've actually been to Bahrain 6 times, and I've never seen the tree of life.
Well, you've only got one more coming then.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
All right. Now, about how long did you spend in the Gulf on that tour?
In the Gulf, I'd say we were probably, I think, 4 months.
Okay. And then at that point, was war over and you go home, or?
No, we rotated out. We were stationed in the Gulf for, it was supposed to be 3 months, but the Kitty Hawk broke something and had to go back to Japan and get fixed. So we had to stay an extra month till somebody came and relieved us. And then we went to Australia, which was, it was kind of fun, except we were like the 3rd aircraft carrier that month to pull into port. And I was trying to remember the name of the city, but I guess it doesn't matter.
Oh, it can be Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide.
It was Perth,
Okay.
yes.
All right. only a limited number of major ports in Australia, so we'll get there. Okay. So basically, you were old news by the time you got there because other carriers had been through recently?
Yeah, they weren't excited to see us. I mean, they were happy we were there to help boost their economy a
Mm-hmm.
little, but I mean, really, they'd had enough.
All right. Yeah, as you were, on that whole cruise, both on the way out and stopping off in Hong Kong, Singapore, then Australia, did you get much of a chance to actually go ashore?
Yeah, usually for a couple hours at a time. I was junior enlisted, so my liberty usually ended right around nightfall, 8 or 9 p.m. I had to be back on board. And yeah, that was kind of a ripoff. In the friendlier countries, yeah, like Australia, they let me stay out all night, which was great because I got a hotel room and I just slept for I think like 18 hours straight because there's no vibration. I mean, on the
Mm-hmm.
boat, there's nothing you can do. Even with a mattress, you're still gonna feel the vibration. You don't sleep too soundly.
So the sleep deprivation thing they did back in boot camp made a certain amount of sense.
I suppose so. Yeah.
All right. When you were in Australia, or for that matter, Hong Kong or someplace like that, how did the civilians treat you?
Hong Kong, they didn't even really notice us.
Mhm.
We got lost. I was with a buddy. We got lost and we tried to get directions, and nobody spoke any English. I assumed the white guy would speak English, so I tried to stop an old white guy, and he just looked at me like I was speaking gibberish. And my buddy's credit card got stolen by the ATM because I don't know what kind of different order. I'm guessing it's because the number pad has the numbers in a different order than they do here.
Mm-hmm.
He tried his pin like 3 times, and instead of spitting out his card, it just cut it up. You could hear it running the shredder. And we got lost. We wandered around. Finally, we found a place. We walked into an office building, and there were a couple of clerks behind glass, and I'd asked it 100 times, it felt like, but I was like, does anybody in here speak English? And this little guy jumped up. He was all super happy. He was like, I speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And he helped us out.
All right. Now, you go to Australia, then do they send you back to San Diego from there, or what do you do?
We went to Australia, and then we went to Hawaii. We were in Hawaii for a couple of days. We ported in at Pearl Harbor. That was pretty fun. It was expensive. It's funny, yeah. Some of the older guys were joking about the exchange rate in Australia, and we found out there really was. Because, I mean, they use U.S. dollars, but everything costs twice as many of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
All right. And then from there back to San Diego, or?
yeah, I'm pretty sure we went to San Diego right after that.
Okay. Now, you eventually leave the Constellation and go to a different ship. I mean, how does that play out?
Yeah, we decommissioned the Constellation. That was our last voyage, and that was pretty fun. We closed out all the spaces, and that was basically just putting them back to as close as we could get to their original condition, painting over all our decorative paint jobs and what have you, labeling all the valves just in case they ever need to call her back into action. Everything's just ready to go.
Okay, so you're basically mothballing the ship at that point.
Yeah.
They're not going to scrap it. It's going to be there if they need it again. All right. And then having done, I mean, how long does that take to actually get a ship processed that way?
Months. It took. Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I didn't keep any records of it, but it was a couple of months.
Okay. Now, did you get to spend much time on shore, or are you just still staying on the ship?
I stayed on the ship as long as they would let me, because I didn't want to move to a barracks that close to moving, across the country.
Mm-hmm. And did you know where you were going next?
Yeah, actually, when we were underway, they contacted some detailers so that each of us could arrange for our next duty station. And I was actually on the phone with a detailer, and someone a couple of seats down was like, ask for a sea school. I was like, all right, so I'd like to go to a sea school. And the detailer said, fine, sure, which one? I said, I don't know. And the guy said, air conditioning and refrigeration. I was like, all right, I would like to go to air conditioning and refrigeration school. He's like, all right, that's fine. What do you want to do after that? I was like, I don't know, East Coast. He's like, all right, well, we can do that. So I went to the air conditioning and refrigeration school. That took about 10 weeks, I think.
Okay. And where was that?
That was in Norfolk, or somewhere in Norfolk
Yeah,
area.
yeah, Norfolk, Newport News, one of those,
Yeah.
Yankton or whatever, Portsmouth, or that whole area.
Yeah.
Major naval base
Yeah,
area
it was somewhere in there. Yeah.
there. Okay. And what did that training actually consist of?
That was mostly classroom education. It had a little bit of laboratory, but mostly it was just theory. Yeah.
Okay. Do you get much hands-on work at all?
There was some. I mean, they knew that there wasn't really much point to giving us a whole lot of hands-on in the school, because either we would go to a boat that was new and really didn't need repairs, or we'd go to a boat that was old and we'd learn on the job.
Because the boats themselves would be quite a bit different. I mean, being on a destroyer escort or something like that, as opposed to an aircraft carrier, you might have very different things to do.
Right,
And
right.
so you just have to learn whatever that has. All right. And then did you get much liberty or time in town or time off from the training?
For the most part. I mean, when we were in port, it was mostly like a 9 to 5 job. Only it was like 6 to 4.
Yeah, and you know, this was a place that has a lot of sailors in it. I mean, what's the attitude of the locals toward the Navy people?
They were basically neutral. I mean, they didn't have that whole, we love our military attitude you see in the smaller towns, because they were used to it.
Mm-hmm.
But, they didn't have any like bad blood, or, they didn't really hate the military, or they probably would move to a smaller town.
Okay, so there weren't signs on the lawns that say dogs and sailors keep off the grass, or which they actually had in World War II.
Yeah, I've heard of those. I've never seen one.
All right. Okay, so you're there, and then what ship then do you get assigned to?
I went to the USS Enterprise.
Okay. Now, was that a ship of the same vintage as the Constellation, or was it newer?
Yeah, it was pretty much the same. I think the keel for that was also laid in 1968. 58?
Okay, but
It doesn't matter.
yeah,
It's
sort of
old.
post World War II, but not real, but not now. And that was still a diesel-powered carrier.
No, that one was nuclear.
Okay. And what did you actually have to do on that ship?
I had to operate and maintain humongous air conditioners. I had 8 air conditioning plants. 7 of them were 363-ton units, and one of them was a 300-ton unit. And then I had 6 refrigeration units. I think those were each 5-ton. They were huge. They were like a 6-cylinder V6, but instead of an engine, they were a refrigerant compressor. They were huge. And then like all the different peripheral equipment, like the water coolers, like ice makers out on the mess decks, and just everything.
Was there a lot of stuff breaking down? I mean, was it a busy job?
Yeah, it was constant work, because all the equipment was old and everything needed fixed or maintained in some way at all times.
All right. And did they have enough of you working on that to keep it going, or were you on a lot of shifts? Or
Yeah, they had plenty of us. I mean, sometimes we had more work to do than other times, just because the way things work out. But they had a pretty good planned maintenance system, so I mean that for the most part, kept things from breaking. But some things can't be prevented. Like you can't set up preventive maintenance for a seawater pipe that's 8 inches, 10 inches. You just gotta wait till it breaks.
what was the hardest or the nastiest job that you had by way of repair work?
I don't know. I think when I had to climb into the mud drum on the boiler on the Connie, that was pretty gross. And the Enterprise, well, both of them I did a lot of work in the bilge, which is pretty gross.
So that's down in the bottom of the ship, and
Yeah, that's down in the 7th deck. It's above the tanks and voids, but it's where all the leaks build up, whatever leaks they happen to be. Even from some of the dirtier shipmates leaking there themselves, it's pretty gross.
and what do you have to do down there?
It depends. I mean, if you're just doing work on machines, usually you got to take apart pipes and, maybe remove and install a pump motor or something from underneath, you know, different little things like that. But if you're in port, they manage to get them dry, and then you gotta take them down to bare metal and prime them and paint them. Which actually, that was a funny thing. When I was on the Connie, we had he was a yeoman or a quartermaster or something, just this little seaman. Got assigned, and they called me to the booth, and I was still a fireman. I think I was a fireman's apprentice at the time. They told me I was in charge of this guy. I was like, what do you mean in charge? They were like, well, he's going to do all the work you usually do, but so are you. But he's going to do more of it than you are. I was like, all right, whatever. So I took him down in the bilge. We started needle gunning the bilge. And he started crying. He needs a face mask, and he needs glasses, and he needs this, and he needs that. I got him all the safety equipment he needed, and finally we got back to work. And like the next day, he reports again. He was like, again. I was like, what? This is like, it's just a job. You just do it, you know. And we get halfway through the day, and he's like, man, I have super respect for you. I was like, of course you do, but why are you even here? Aren't you supposed to be in some office, like ironing military creases in your uniform or something? He said, yeah. He said, yeah, but I got sent down here to work with you guys for a week because I told my LPO I think engineers are dirty and gross. I was like, oh, well, in that case, you keep needle gunning. I'll go find a way to stir the paint. I'll be back in a little while.
All right. So certain kind of discipline there. All right. Now, when you're on the Enterprise, do you get sent out to sea eventually?
I actually flew out to meet the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
When I finished school, the Enterprise was already at sea. I'm not sure if it was in the Gulf yet. But I remember I had to fly all through Arabia. I flew to an airport in Fujairah where I met the military airplane,
Mm-hmm.
and then we took a bus across the United Arab Emirates. We drove by Abu Dhabi, which I thought was funny because I liked Garfield comics when I was a kid. So I thought Abu Dhabi was really funny to see. We went past a place called Jalalabad. My brothers thought that was funny because they go, Jalalala.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, do you join the ship in port, or do they have to take you out in a boat or fly you out, or what do they do?
Let's see, we got to some support activity. We took a private boat, which is like Merchant Marines or something. It was
Mm-hmm.
privately owned, ex-military boat. And that was like a 3-day cruise. It was cool, actually being a passenger for once on a boat instead of actually having to do something. And that was cool. They had a little library. I read a couple of books out of the library over 3 days. And we got close enough that we were able to fly on a helicopter. I think that was a Puma. We took a Puma helicopter from the private boat out to the aircraft carrier.
All right. Now, when you go and you start up on a new ship, is there, somebody whose job it is to orient you or whatever, or does someone say, well, there's your booth, show up over here at this time, and you just do it?
Kinda. There's an indoc class, indoctrination, and everybody goes through it. Like the new thing is all enlisted pay grades have to go through indoc. So the khaki enlisted went through like with other khakis, so that's nothing. But like E6 and below all had to sit through this classroom, and I think on the Enterprise when I was there, it was like a 2-week course or something. It was ridiculous because they talked about everything from like racial sensitivity to where the mess decks are, to where the blue tile area is, to just everything. Gender sensitivity.
Okay. Well, you've got this large community living together here. So, about what proportion of the crew were female?
Not a large one, maybe 10%, maybe less.
Okay, and were they mostly doing kind of technical or clerical stuff, or were they all over the place?
No, they were mixed in. They had all the exact same jobs and billets.
All right. as far as you can tell, I mean, what kind of sort of atmosphere was there, on the ship, whether it's for women or minorities or things like that? Um,
Well, it was uniform based. I mean, it doesn't matter your color or your sex. Everything depends on your uniform. Whether you have to stand out of the way for someone else to walk through the passage, or whether people have to get out of your way, just little things. It's all uniform based.
mhm. So in other words, it's sort of based on your rank
Yeah.
as far as that goes. Now, you also referred to people as being cocky enlisted. What does that refer to?
Oh, khaki enlisted.
Khaki, yeah.
That's E7 through E9. They're like considered elites, I suppose. They're chief petty officers, and well, they're basically untouchable. They're like a little gang of their own.
Mm-hmm.
They get to a certain pay grade, and then their job becomes just paperwork and office work, and they don't really do anything
All right.
anymore.
Now, are these people who are sort of career military? Does it take you a while to get to that level?
Yeah, I guess the average time and rate for E7 is like 15 years or something, and a lot of those guys stay until 30.
Mm-hmm. All right. What do you do on your time off when you're not on one of your duty shifts and you're not sleeping? What else is there to do?
Well, you can go to a movie. I spent most of my time at the bar. I had a favorite bar, I actually would take a cab downtown Norfolk and go to Moe and O'Malley's Irish pub. And I'm sure that I paid like the electric bill there, just with my tab every month. It was ridiculous.
Okay. But what about when you're at sea?
You do nothing. You just work and sleep.
I mean, do they provide anything for you? I mean, do they have movies or classes or other things like that going on that you could do?
Yeah, yeah. They usually have. There was a closed circuit TV on board. Sometimes like the AV crew would produce little shows, or mostly it was just for if the captain wanted to address the crew and didn't want to assemble the crew. He could just go over the TV and explain stuff. Sometimes they'd play movies. Sometimes big time Hollywood stars would come out and promote movies, and we'd get to see their movies before anyone else.
And do you remember any of them coming to one of the ships you were on?
Yeah, Ben Affleck came out actually and brought the movie Paycheck, and that movie was awful. It was, and he gave us hats. And other stars, I mean, Drew Carey came out once, and I don't know, some baseball guy.
Okay, so now, one of the things that's sort of characteristic of at least a lot of what the ground forces have done in Iraq and Afghanistan and so forth is that they can go online or use email or call home or things like that. Did you have much opportunity to communicate or with people at home or anything else like that, or use email, or was that not really what people did?
Well, yeah, sometimes we get time to use the email or the phone. If you happen to be off watch and you don't need to sleep right away, and they have the phone lines open, and there's not a line for the phone, there's a chance you can call home.
Mm-hmm.
And then email's a little more convenient because I mean, it still has bandwidth hours. I mean, there's times they shut down the computers, just you can't use them. And then, you know, when they turn them back on, there's going to be a line because everybody's waiting to email home. I like the snail mail. I like the postal service mail because, I don't know. Part of it is because my mom worked for the post office, you know.
Okay.
And also it's guaranteed, almost guaranteed. 'Cause, I mean, sometimes it can fall overboard. You can lose a whole bundle of mail on accident. And people could send care packages, and there's no guarantee your care package is going to come in any condition, because that's also handled by the crew.
Mm-hmm.
And by who knows whom in between. It could be thrown, stomped on, dropped. It's fun though.
Okay. And did you write home very regularly or hear from home very much, or?
I did. I wrote home a bunch. Like when I saw something really cool, like I remember flying fish, I wrote down everything that struck me about flying fish and sent that home.
Okay. Now, does the military make any effort to monitor communications or censor mail or things like that, or?
I don't know about censoring mail, but any electronic communications is subject to yeah, monitoring, censorship, and termination.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Now, when you're at sea on the Enterprise, where do you go?
We went to, well, the Persian Gulf, and we stopped on the way back in Italy. Oh, there was a port in the Gulf we could visit. It was in the United Arab Emirates, I think. It was just near Dubai. It was
Mhm.
just a cab ride away from Dubai. We called it the sandbox because what it was the military got a plot of land. I don't know if they borrowed it or rented it or bought it, but they walled it off, and it was just a big box. And there's a little like canteen there and a lot of shops. Local vendors would sell stuff, and there was a stage for like performers and stuff. It was a sandbox. A lot of times we were just restricted to the sandbox, but sometimes the threat level would be low enough we could take a cab ride out to Dubai. They told us not to stand out too much, but I like to wear my Hawaiian shirt
Mhm.
because I got it in Hawaii. Why not, right?
Right. Okay. Now, what was the now? Roughly what time period were you over there with the Enterprise? Was that 2004 or 5 or?
That was 2004 through 2006.
Okay. So you're out there for a fairly long period, or are you going back and forth?
Um, we were at sea when I checked on board, and then 5 months left in the deployment. So we did all that, and then we got back to Norfolk and took apart stuff and put stuff back together and did a lot of work. And then we went to England once. That was fun. I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to go to England on the 4th of July. I had duty that day, but I was out on a smoke break, and I ran into a guy I knew in security, and he said he had just sent a box of zip ties to the pier because they ran out of handcuffs. There were too many fights. Can't have American sailors in England on the 4th of July.
Mhm.
He said there were so many fights, they ran out of handcuffs. So he'd send out zip ties, and he said what's remarkable is that wasn't the first box of zip ties he sent out. They ran out of zip ties. He had to send out more zip ties.
Now, are the Americans fighting each other, or the English people, or?
English, yeah, because I mean it
Well,
was
I suppose it was our independence, and they were the bad guys then.
yeah. I guess it's because a lot of the fights started just in bars or pubs. The sailors would be in there and they'd say, "Hey, it's the 4th of July, it's Independence Day," and the Brits would say, "Ah, so what? It's nothing."
Hmm.
And I don't know, they took exception to that.
But you don't think there was any particular tension over just having the war still dragging on, or hostility to it out there?
No, we were all pretty well convinced that we'd done our part. We were all taking our turns in the war. I
Mhm.
mean, nobody was really concerned that the ongoing war was an extra stressor. It was because that's a lot of it is because that's over on the other side of the world, and
Mhm.
we'll go there and do our job there when it's time, but we'll also do whatever job we have to do here
Mhm.
during that time.
I was just sort of thinking in terms of uh, basically, as the kind of war went on, it got steadily less popular in Europe, including in England, and there was a lot of pressure on the government to get out and that kind of thing. But since you weren't right there in the bars with those guys, it was sort of hard to tell what they were talking about, so you couldn't really maybe sense what they thought.
Well, I got to talk to a lot of them again when we got back underway.
Hmm.
We had about 80 guys, I think, on the rolls of restriction on our way back to the States, which I thought it'd be higher. I
Mhm.
mean, with that many zip ties and handcuffs, you'd think there'd be more guys chained up. Maybe some of them didn't get trouble because they didn't start the fight
Hmm.
or something like that. Maybe some of them just got away with it. But no, it was mostly about just American pride versus British pride.
Okay. Now, at a certain point, when you were on the Enterprise, you got to go through the Suez Canal. Was that?
Yeah, it was cool because I didn't get to go topside because that's shallow water, and my shallow water detail was to watch one of the air conditioners, and I was pretty stupid really because it was in a manned space already. It was in one of the auxiliary rooms, and it had a microprocessor to operate it, and we weren't using that one. It was shut down, so I had to sit there and just watch a machine that wasn't doing anything. But yeah, the guys who went topside told me that that at one point, if they had rocks in their hands, they could have thrown one and hit Europe and thrown another one and hit Africa, you know, without turning, really. And Egypt, I guess, had a bunch of tanks parked on the ridge just in case we did something funny, so they could just start shooting at us, which would have been foolish because we had an aircraft carrier and they had tanks.
Yeah, well, they probably weren't necessarily really waiting for the Israelis to come back or something. But yeah, it's still kind of an odd thing to spot when you're doing that. Now, as you think about the different places and so forth that you went or visited, are there other particular experiences or things that stand out or places that you really remember distinctly?
You know, I remember when we went to Seattle, it took about 3 weeks to get there from San Diego, mostly because Navy ships don't go in straight lines. And we finally got there, and we pulled into Puget Sound. And I remember the water was smooth as glass, and you could smell the pine trees. You could see pine trees on both sides, and you could smell them. And I just wanted to go to the trees because, you know, trees instead of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, does it kind of wear on you after a while to be kind of cooped up on a ship, even a big ship, for months at a time?
Yeah, you get tired of people because, like I said, you get 18 cubic feet to sleep. I mean, you get curtains, you can cover it with curtains, but they can take away your curtains if they think you don't deserve them. And it's just, you know, 200-300 guys in a small space, you get tired of each other.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you have a certain kind of set of friends or guys you'd regularly hang out with, or did you mostly just kind of mind your own business?
Well, mostly the guys in my space or the guys in my shop. Usually just, you know, the guys I work with were the ones I'd see out in town or I'd go out in town with. And in Norfolk, I mostly just kept to myself. I just stuck to my favorite bar.
Mm-hmm. All right. Basically, you did one term of enlistment. You had 4 years in the Navy. Now, while you were there, were you considering the prospect of re-enlisting or staying on, or was there much pressure to do that?
I considered it. I mean, they really pushed me toward it, but there was I just didn't want it. I considered it. There was advancement exams actually were a big part of it because you get advanced by getting a good evaluation on performance and by scoring well on your advancement exam. Mm-hmm. And when I made E4, I was in the first increment because regardless of my my evaluations, I scored in like the 99 percentile on the test, and so I got paid the day I put on my crows, which a lot of guys have to wait up to 6 months. They're like 3 pay increments for promotions.
You said the day you put on your crows. What does that mean?
That's the E4. The insignia is a perched eagle, and you wear it here or you know on your collar, depending on which uniform you have to wear that day. And most people just call it the crow because the eagle's what the captains wear, you know. But yeah, and then for the E5, I passed that in like the 98 percentile twice on the test, and I never got my promotion. And it's funny because the promotion or the evaluation that would have got me E5 went to a guy who never did any work at all. He got the good eval because he said he was going to stay in. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the chain of command, you know, the other enlisted guys would tell me, you know, we'll give you the good eval if you're going to stay in. You tell me you're going to re-enlist, I'll give you a good eval. You get E5. I was like, dude, you missed that chance. You should have given me the good eval for the good work I've done. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there was a temptation to stay in, but not a strong one.
Mm-hmm. Did you just feel, okay, you've done your bit or whatever?
Yeah. I've taken my turn. You know, I did my time. I've paid my dues.
Okay. Did you have ideas about what you wanted to do when you got back?
No. All I knew was that I had the GI Bill, and so I figured I'd go through school eventually. But really, I just wanted to relax, do some stupid job, some mindless Joe job, which I did. I got a job at a liquor store, which was awesome. I really enjoyed working at the liquor store for a while. I don't know why. I loved it.
well, a different experience certainly from being in the Navy. So when did your period of service end?
January of 2006 was my final date. It was January 8th. But I took terminal leave. I was home for like a month on terminal leave, which I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that still, because I was still in, but I wasn't. Kind of a netherland. I don't really like that.
Okay, and with the nature of your service, you were not with a reserve unit or a guard unit or anything like that. So you're not subject to be called up again or anything else like that.
Well, after my active duty, I was still subject to recall in the inactive ready reserve,
Mm-hmm.
or individual ready reserve, which is in order to maintain eligibility in the ready reserve, all you have to do is annually. What Jason and to like Freddie and crap. It's pretty cool.
All right.
All right, cool.
Okay. We seem to have lost some of our sound here at a certain point, so I want to just go back a little bit. And again, basically we had talked about you had enlisted for a 4-year period, you got to the end of that term, and basically decided that you'd had enough of the Navy at that point, time to move on to something else. And now, where did you go to college?
Grand Rapids Community College.
Okay. And then with an associate's degree, I mean, did you have an idea of what kind of job or work you'd go into, or just?
Well, I assumed I would get something, you know, a little higher paid and a little more technical or office-ish than, you know, the liquor store could have had.
Right. Well, did you think that any of the training or the experience that you had in the Navy would be useful when you go into plumbing and heating or air conditioning or something like that?
You know, I thought that all that heating and cooling, all that air conditioning, refrigeration experience would help me get a job, like, yeah, in a trade. But that doesn't seem to have worked either.
And would you need to actually go and do some specialized, training thing or join a union or something else like that to do that work? I mean, because there's other routes into that to get certified or.
Yeah, I don't know. I have my EPA certification for refrigerant, but I don't know. Whenever I talk to the heating the heating and cooling guys, they tell me they don't want to retrain me from, you know, what I saw on board to what I'll see in houses, and yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not a great time to be looking for a job generally at this point. All right, now to look back at the time that you spent in the Navy, how do you think that affected you, or what did you get out of it?
Well, I did get to go around the world twice. Actually, before I learned to drive, I'd been around the world twice. So that was pretty cool. I did get to serve my country in her time of need. That was probably the main thing. And then I get bragging rights. You know, I get to brag about all the cool things I've done and seen in my life. And I'm old. You know, I looked up veteran in the dictionary once just to find out what exactly. I like denotations. And it turns out it's synonymous with the word old.
There you go. Do you think it's something that it'd be a good thing for most people to do, or really just depend on who you are?
Yeah, I think everybody should do it. In fact, I think if everybody did it, then they could shorten the enlistments from 4 years to 2 years. I think if everybody did 2 years in the service, this whole country would be a bit stronger.
Some things might be quite a bit different. Now, I guess with the Navy, there's maybe somewhat less of a need just for more people. I mean, did you have, on the ships you were on, did you have people who were reservists or things like that who were being called up? I mean, the ground units on a regular basis get sent and resent, and a lot of the same guys go back and forth. Do you think that goes on as much with the Navy?
It does some.